I'm Katharina, 29, a Chicago art gallery curator who received a mysterious text from my sister about our parents' 40th anniversary banquet. I spent weeks finding the perfect dress and meaningful gift, then drove 2 hours to my childhood suburb stomach-knotting with each mile. Our relationship has been ice-cold for years, but this celebration seemed like the perfect chance for reconciliation. Instead, I walked into the country club in my carefully chosen outfit, only to meet their cold, shocked stares. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family. Share your hometown in the comments. Maybe we're neighbors. Now let me tell you how one unexpected announcement changed everything that night. The tension I felt walking into my parents' anniversary celebration had been building for nearly 3 decades. I was born into what appeared to be the perfect family in our affluent Illinois suburb. My father Richard, a successful corporate attorney, and my mother Eleanor, a former debutante, turned community philanthropist, created a life that looked flawless from the outside. The sprawling colonial house with manicured gardens, country club memberships, and annual family portraits, where we all wore coordinating outfits. My younger sister Jessica, just 2 years behind me, seemed purpose-built to thrive in this environment. From childhood, she embraced every expectation our parents set: straight A's in the proper subjects, like mathematics and science, victory in tennis tournaments, perfect posture at social functions, and an unwavering acceptance of our family's conservative values. Her blonde hair and delicate features mirrored our mother's, while I took after my father's side with darker colouring and more angular face. A physical difference that sometimes felt symbolic of my place in the family. Unlike Jessica, I questioned everything. Why couldn't I wear pants to Sunday church? Why did we need to host elaborate dinner parties where everyone seemed miserable? Why was Mother's charity work focused more on appearances than actual impact? Each question widened the gap between us, marking me as difficult, rebellious, ungrateful. Art became my sanctuary when I was 7. I still remember the first time I held a real paintbrush in elementary school art class, feeling an immediate connection to the colours and shapes I could create. At home, I would sketch for hours, transforming our basement storage room into a makeshift studio. My parents tolerated this hobby with thinly veiled disapproval. "It's fine to be creative, Katharina," my mother would say, "but you need something practical to fall back on." By high school, the family dynamic was firmly established. Jessica as the golden child who brought pride to the family name, and me as the problem child whose interests and questions were inconvenient disruptions to their carefully constructed world. The defining moment came during my junior year when my mixed media piece won the state art competition. The award ceremony fell on the same evening as one of my father's firm dinners. "We simply can't miss it," my mother explained without meeting my eyes. "Your father's managing partner will be there. You understand how important these connections are." I attended the ceremony alone, accepting my award to applause from strangers, while the 2 empty seats reserved for my parents glared back at me. My art teacher drove me home afterward, filling the car with enthusiastic praise that only highlighted the silence that awaited me at home. When I arrived, my parents were just returning from their dinner, my mother immediately noticing the certificate in my hand. "Oh, was that tonight?" she asked, her voice carrying the practiced surprise that I had come to recognize as insincere. My father barely glanced up from checking his emails. "That's nice, Katharina. Did you enjoy yourself?" The college decision became the ultimate battlefield. I had been accepted to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago with a partial scholarship, a dream come true. My parents had other plans, Northwestern law, following in my father's footsteps. "This isn't a game, Katharina," my father said during the heated dinner argument that followed my announcement. "Art is a hobby, not a career. We won't finance a degree that leads nowhere." "Your cousin Margaret started at Northwestern pre-law last fall," my mother added. "She's already making connections that will set her up for life." "I don't want Margaret's life," I replied, my voice shaking but determined. "I want my own." The ultimatum came swiftly: choose Northwestern or lose their financial support entirely. At 18, with more conviction than sense, I chose art school. The next 4 years became a blur of student loans, part-time jobs, and occasional 60-hour work weeks during summers to make ends meet. I worked as a barista, gallery assistant, campus tour guide, and anything else that would help pay for textbooks and art supplies. My parents' support dwindled to obligatory birthday cards with impersonal messages and occasional stilted phone calls initiated by my mother. Jessica visited when she could always caught in the middle, always careful not to take sides, overtly though her presence alone was a comfort. During those college years, I tried several times to rebuild connections. I invited them to student exhibitions, sent thoughtful gifts for holidays, and even swallowed my pride to attend the country club Christmas party during sophomore year break. Each attempt ended the same way, with subtle criticism of my choices, uncomfortable silences, and the unspoken message that I had chosen the wrong path and was suffering the natural consequences. By graduation, I had secured an entry-level position at a small but respected Chicago gallery, found an apartment with 2 roommates to keep costs manageable, and accepted that my relationship with my parents might never be what I had hoped for as a child. The graduation ceremony itself became another milestone marked by their absence. They sent Jessica as their representative, claiming a scheduling conflict with a long-planned European cruise that couldn't possibly be adjusted. "They're proud of you in their way," Jessica insisted as we had dinner afterward, her discomfort obvious. "They just don't know how to show it." "You don't have to make excuses for them," I told her, squeezing her hand. "It's not your job to fix what they broke." But Jessica, ever the peacemaker, never stopped trying. After college, I threw myself into building a life they couldn't dismiss. I worked 14-hour days at the gallery, volunteered to coordinate events no one else wanted to handle, and built a network of contacts throughout Chicago's art scene. Each small promotion felt like a vindication of my choice, even as the distance between my parents and me stretched from a gap into a chasm. For a full year after graduation, I didn't go home at all. The break wasn't planned. It evolved naturally from declining one uncomfortable holiday invitation, then another, until suddenly 12 months had passed. Jessica visited me instead, bringing updates about our parents that I pretended not to care about, but secretly absorbed like parched soil taking in rain. "Dad got the partnership," she reported over brunch one Sunday. "Mum redecorated the living room again. Everything's grey and white now. Very modern, actually. You might like it." Eventually, family obligation pulled me back for occasional visits, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Aunt's significant birthday. Each visit followed the same exhausting script, my mother's subtle critiques disguised as concern. "You look tired, darling. Is that gallery working you too hard for what they pay?" My father's dismissive questions about my career, and is there any room for advancement in this art business? And Jessica's valiant but futile attempts to steer conversations toward neutral topics. The pattern became predictable. I would arrive determined to maintain peace, last about 3 hours, before some comment would pierce my defenses, then retreat to my childhood bedroom or a nearby coffee shop to decompress. Jessica would later find me apologize for what wasn't her fault, and we'd share a moment of genuine connection before the next round of family theatre began. 3 years ago, the dynamic reached a painful new low during Christmas dinner. Jessica had been dating Thomas, a financial advisor from a family that travelled in the same social circles as our parents. When she brought him home for the holidays, my parents treated him like visiting royalty. They introduced him to every relative with glowing praise. "Jessica's young man works with the Davidson firm. You remember Harrison Davidson, don't you?" Included him in family stories and inside jokes, and my father even brought out his prized 30-year-old scotch to share with him. Meanwhile, my partner Sam, whom I'd been dating for nearly 2 years, received cold politeness at best. When my Uncle Peter asked what Sam did for work, my father interrupted before Sam could answer. "He's in some kind of tech startup," he said vaguely, though Sam had clearly told them earlier he was an environmental engineer developing sustainable building materials. Katharina always finds these interesting people. The contrast was so stark that even our normally oblivious grandparents noticed. My grandmother pulled me aside later that evening. "Your young man seems lovely," she whispered, patting my hand. "Your grandfather and I would love to hear more about his work sometime, when it's quieter." I tried one final reconciliation attempt last Thanksgiving. Sam couldn't join me due to a work commitment, so I arrived alone with homemade cranberry sauce and a portfolio of recent gallery successes, stupidly hoping that tangible proof of my accomplishments might finally earn their respect. During dinner, I mentioned that the gallery owner was considering me for a promotion to assistant director. "That's wonderful, Katharina," my mother said, with the tight smile that never reached her eyes. Though I was speaking with Caroline Davis last week, her daughter Amanda just made partner at her law firm, 32 years old. "Can you imagine the security that brings different paths, Mom?" I replied, fighting to keep my voice even. "Yes, well, she continued, serving herself more sweet potatoes. Some paths have clearer destinations than others. I left the next morning instead of staying the planned weekend, claiming a work emergency. Jessica followed me to my car, her expression pained. "They don't mean to be cruel," she insisted. "They just worry about you." "No," I countered, tossing my overnight bag into the trunk. "They worry about how my choices reflect on them. There's a difference." For 6 months after that, our contact dwindled to occasional text messages and brief phone calls on birthdays. I focused on my work, my relationship with Sam, and the vibrant chosen family of friends I'd built in Chicago. I was healing slowly, creating a life where my parents' approval wasn't the oxygen I needed to breathe. Then came Jessica's text on a random Tuesday afternoon. Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary celebration this Saturday at Oakmont Country Club. Big surprise party with family and their friends. Starts at 7. Thought you should know. No formal invitation had arrived. No call from my parents mentioning the event. Just this cryptic message from my sister. I stared at those words for nearly an hour, emotions warring within me. Anger at the obvious exclusion. Hurt that after 40 years of marriage, they couldn't set aside our differences for one significant celebration. Exhaustion at the thought of another painful family encounter. But beneath those feelings lay something else. A stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, this milestone might open a door to healing. Perhaps Jessica was right and they simply didn't know how to bridge the gap they'd created. So I spent 2 weeks finding the perfect dress. An elegant navy blue sheath that was both sophisticated and subtly artistic with its asymmetrical neckline. I commissioned a small painting from a talented friend, a watercolor of the garden where my parents had been married based on their wedding photos. I even made an appointment for a professional blowout to tame my usually unruly dark curls. As I drove the familiar route to my hometown, memories flooded back with each passing landmark. The ice cream shop where we'd celebrate Jessica's softball victories. The park where my father had once taught me to ride a bike in that brief golden period before my individuality became problematic. The high school where I'd first discovered my artistic voice and where the divide between my parents' expectations and my reality had grown unbridgeable. With each mile, my stomach tightened, but I pressed on the carefully wrapped gift on the passenger seat beside me, like a talisman of hope. The Oakmont Country Club stood exactly as I remembered it. Stately columns flanking the entrance, immaculately trimmed hedges lining the circular driveway, and the distinctive green awnings that had featured in countless family photographs over the years. As I handed my keys to the valet, I noticed several familiar cars belonging to aunts, uncles, and my parents' oldest friends. The evening air carried the scent of late spring flowers as I smoothed my dress, checked my reflection one last time in the glass doors, and took a steadying breath. The gift felt suddenly heavy in my hands. Walking into the grand ballroom was like stepping into a time capsule of my childhood. The same crystal chandeliers that had intimidated me during junior cotillion classes. The same rich wood paneling where generations of member photographs hung in gilded frames. Even the same floral arrangements. White roses and hydrangeas that my mother had always preferred for important occasions. I spotted my cousin Marcus first, his expression shifting from pleasant recognition to surprise as I approached. "Katerina, I didn't expect to see you tonight," he said, kissing my cheek. "You look great. How's the art world treating you?" Before I could answer, his wife Jennifer leaned in. "We haven't seen you in ages." "Are your parents thrilled you could make it? I know how busy you must be in the city." Their genuine warmth made what happened next even more jarring. Across the room, I saw my parents holding court among their closest friends. My father looked distinguished as always in his tailored tuxedo silver hair perfectly styled. My mother was radiant in a champagne-coloured gown that complemented her blonde updo and pearl jewellery. They were laughing at something Walter Davis had said, their expressions lighter than I'd seen in years. Then my mother's gaze drifted over Walter's shoulder and locked with mine. The transformation was instantaneous. Her smile vanished, replaced by wide-eyed shock that quickly hardened into something colder. She nudged my father, who turned and saw me. His expression didn't change much. Just a slight tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible straightening of his posture. With the gift clutched against my chest like a shield, I moved toward them, weaving through clusters of guests, who greeted me with varying degrees of surprise. The 20 steps to my parents felt like walking a gauntlet. "Katerina," my mother said when I reached them, her voice pitched low. "What are you doing here?" No hello, no thank you for coming, just that question edged with unmistakable displeasure. "It's your anniversary celebration," I replied, extending the wrapped package. "I wanted to be here, to celebrate with you." My father cleared his throat, glancing around at nearby guests who were now watching our interaction with undisguised curiosity. "I'm sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all, "but you're not invited. This is for family only." The words hit like physical blows. For family only. As if I weren't family. As if the shared DNA, the childhood memories, the very fact of being their daughter could be negated by their disapproval of my life choices. "I am family," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I'm your daughter." "Katharina, please," my mother hissed, her smile now painfully artificial. "Don't make a scene. Not tonight." I became aware of a commotion near the entrance and turned to see Jessica arriving with Thomas. She spotted me immediately, her face registering alarm as she hurried over. "You came," she said, hugging me tightly before turning to our parents. "Isn't it nice that Katie made it?" My mother's gaze hardened as she looked at Jessica. "Did you invite her?" Jessica's hesitation was brief but telling. "I thought she should know about it. It's a big anniversary." "That wasn't your decision to make," my father said, his lawyer voice emerging, the tone he used when someone had violated a contract term. I looked between them, the awful truth crystallizing. "You really didn't want me here. Your own daughter, at your anniversary." "Katharina," my mother sighed as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. "Your lifestyle choices don't align with our family values. We've made that clear. This celebration is about the family and life your father and I have built. A life that includes me," I insisted, the gift now hanging awkwardly from my hand. "Not the parts we're celebrating," my father replied with brutal finality. Jessica stepped closer, her hand on my arm. "Mom, Dad, please. Can't we just enjoy tonight together as a family?" Thomas hovered uncertainly behind Jessica, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding drama. Around us, conversations had quieted as relatives and family friends pretended not to eavesdrop while catching every word. I stood frozen, the rejection washing over me in waves. This wasn't just about missing an invitation to a party. This was my parents declaring publicly and without reservation that I wasn't part of the family narrative they wanted to present to the world. In that moment, I had a choice. I could leave quietly nursing my wounds in private, as I had so many times before. I could retreat to my car and drive back to Chicago, accepting once and for all that the relationship I longed for with my parents would never materialize. Or I could stand my ground. For the first time in 29 years, I chose the latter. I carefully placed the gift on a nearby table, buying myself precious seconds to gather the composure that threatened to shatter. When I turned back to face my parents, I felt something shift inside me. A lifetime of seeking approval transforming into the sudden liberating certainty that I would never receive it, and perhaps no longer needed it. "You know," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "I've spent my entire adult life trying to prove my worth to you. Trying to show that my path, though different from what you wanted, has value." My mother glanced nervously at the Davis couple who had edged away but remained within earshot. "This isn't the time or place, Katharina." "When is the time? When is the place?" I asked, not bothering to lower my voice. "Because every time I've tried to connect with you, every accomplishment I've shared, every olive branch I've extended, you've made it clear that nothing I do will ever be good enough." My father stepped closer, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet tone I remembered from childhood scoldings. "You're embarrassing yourself and us. I suggest you leave before you say something you'll regret." "I only regret the years I've spent seeking approval from people who decided long ago they would never give it," I replied. "Do you even know what's happening in my life? Do you have any idea what you're rejecting?" Jessica moved to my side, her presence a silent show of support that surprised me. "Maybe we should all take a moment to breathe, find somewhere private to talk." But the dam had broken. Years of suppressed hurt and anger flowed freely, now impossible to contain. "I was named director of the Meridian Gallery last month," I said, watching their faces for any sign that this significant achievement might matter to them. "The youngest director in their 50-year history. The promotion you said would never come in my little art hobby." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, or reluctant recognition, crossed my father's face before he masked it. My mother's expression remained unchanged, her lips pressed into a thin line. "That's nice," she offered without enthusiasm. "Is that what you came to tell us?" "No," I said, the word hanging in the air between us. "I came because, despite everything, you're my parents, and I thought maybe, just maybe, your 40th anniversary might be important enough to set aside our differences. I thought family might finally mean more than appearances." I hadn't planned what came next. The words tumbled out before I could consider their impact, before I could remember that this news, this precious private joy, had been something I wanted to share differently. I'm pregnant. The announcement silenced the room. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Dozens of eyes turned toward our family tableau. 14 weeks. I continued into the silence. Sam and I are having a baby, your grandchild. Jessica gasped, her hands flying to her mouth before breaking into a wide, genuine smile. Katie, oh my God. She threw her arms around me, her excitement unmarred by the tension surrounding us. I'm going to be an aunt. My parents stood frozen, my father's usual composure cracking to reveal naked shock. My mother's hand gripped her pearl necklace as if seeking an anchor in suddenly choppy waters. You're pregnant. She finally managed her voice faint. Yes, I confirmed, one hand instinctively moving to rest on my still flat stomach. Due in November, the murmurs began, then rippling through the gathered guests. My Aunt Patricia broke from the crowd, approaching with arms outstretched. Congratulations, sweetheart, she exclaimed, embracing me warmly. What wonderful news. Others followed, cousins, family friends, distant relatives, offering congratulations and questions about due dates and morning sickness and whether we'd learnt the gender yet. The celebration I'd been excluded from suddenly swirled around me, with me at its centre. Through the crowd, I kept my eyes on my parents, who remained rooted in place, their anniversary momentarily forgotten as they processed this unexpected development. My father whispered something to my mother, his expression unreadable. When the initial excitement ebbed and guests began to drift back to their previous conversations, I approached my parents once more, Jessica still at my side. I didn't come here to drop this news as some kind of revenge, I said quietly. I came hoping we could heal, that my child could know their grandparents, but I won't subject them to the conditional love I grew up with. I retrieved my gift from the table where I'd left it. This was for you, a painting of the garden where you were married. I thought it might remind you of when your lives together were just beginning, before expectations and appearances became more important than happiness. I placed it back in my mother's unresisting hands. My child will know what unconditional love feels like, what acceptance feels like. Whether that includes you is entirely your choice. With that, I turned and walked toward the exit, my heart pounding but my steps steady. Jessica hurried after me, catching my arm in the foyer. Katie, wait, she pleaded. Don't leave like this. I'm not leaving in anger, Jess, I assured her, squeezing her hand. I'm leaving with clarity. There's a difference. They'll come around, she insisted. The baby, it changes things. You'll see. I smiled sadly, touching her cheek. Maybe, but I'm done putting my life on hold waiting for their approval. My child deserves better than that, so do I. As the valet brought my car around, I took one last look at the country club that had featured so prominently in the backdrop of my childhood. For the first time in my adult life, I was walking away from my parents, not in defeat, but with the quiet dignity of someone who finally understood her own worth. The 2-hour drive back to Chicago passed in a blur of streetlights and suppressed tears. I drove on autopilot, the radio silent, my thoughts too loud to bear any additional noise. Twice my phone rang with Jessica's ringtone, and twice I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready to process the evening through conversation. By the time I reached my apartment, it was nearly midnight. The space felt especially empty. Sam was in Portland for a sustainable building conference and wouldn't return for 3 more days. I kicked off my heels in the entryway, let my carefully styled hair down, and stood in the darkness of my living room, unsure what to do with the adrenaline still coursing through my system. The pregnancy announcement had not been planned. Sam and I had agreed to wait until the 2nd trimester. Today had actually marked exactly 14 weeks. But we'd intended to share the news privately with family first, then friends. Instead, I'd blurted it out in the middle of a country club ballroom full of relatives and virtual strangers, using my unborn child as a weapon in a decades-long family Cold War. Guilt washed over me as I changed out of my dress into comfortable pajamas. What kind of mother starts using her child in family power struggles before they're even born? The thought brought fresh tears, these born of shame rather than hurt. I texted Sam, "Are you still up? Need to talk." His response came immediately, despite the time difference. "Just finished dinner with clients." "Everything okay, baby?" "Okay." I hesitated, then typed, "Baby, fine, I'm fine physically. Can I call?" My phone rang seconds later, Sam's concerned face appearing on the screen. I sank onto the couch and accepted the video call. "What happened?" he asked immediately, his background showing a hotel room tie already loosened and worry etched across his features. The whole story poured out in a jumbled rush. Jessica's text, my decision to attend the painful rejection at the door, and finally my pregnancy announcement to a room full of people before I'd even told most of my friends. "I used our baby as a trump card," I concluded, wiping fresh tears. "What kind of person does that make me?" Sam's expression had shifted throughout my story from concern to anger to a softness that never failed to make me feel safe. "It makes you human," he said gently. "They pushed you into a corner, Kate. You reacted. And for what it's worth, I think you showed incredible restraint considering how they treated you. But the baby is fine," he assured me. "And honestly, I'm kind of glad everyone knows now. I've been bursting to tell people for weeks." His supportive response loosened the knot of anxiety in my chest. I just keep thinking about what this means for us, for our child. My parents might never be the grandparents we hoped they'd be. "Then they'll be missing out on something incredible," Sam said firmly. "We can't control their choices, but we can make sure our kid is surrounded by people who love them unconditionally." We talked for nearly an hour, Sam's steady presence across the digital distance, helping me process the evening's events. He offered to cut his trip short, but I assured him I would be fine for the remaining 3 days. "I love you," he said before we hung up. "Both of you." "We love you too," I replied, the "we" still new and wondrous on my tongue. Sleep came eventually, though it was restless and filled with fragmented dreams. I woke the next morning to a flood of notifications. Missed calls from Jessica, text messages from cousins and family friends, even a tentative message from my Aunt Patricia asking if I'd like to meet for lunch the following week. Most surprising was an email from my colleague Zoe. "Check Instagram. You're trending in certain Chicago art circles." Confused, I opened the app to discover that someone at the country club had apparently recognized me as the newly appointed director of the Meridian Gallery and had shared the story of my dramatic pregnancy announcement and family rejection. It had been picked up by a local arts blog, then shared by several prominent Chicago artists who frequented our gallery. The supportive comments were overwhelming. The Meridian's brilliant new director doesn't just break glass ceilings in the art world, she shatters family patriarchy too. Team Katharina. As someone raised by parents who never accepted my career choices, watching Katharina Wilson stand her ground gives me life. Can't wait to see how motherhood influences her already innovative curatorial voice. I wasn't sure whether to be mortified or touched by this unexpected public dimension to my private family drama. Before I could decide, my doorbell rang. Jessica stood in the hallway looking exhausted in the same clothes from the previous night, her usually perfect hair pulled into a messy ponytail. "I drove straight here after the party," she explained when I opened the door. "Checked into a hotel for a few hours sleep, but I needed to see you." I stepped aside to let her in, noticing the dark circles under her eyes that matched my own. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she insisted, following me to the kitchen where I started brewing coffee. "Katie, I'm so sorry. I never thought they would react that way. I thought if you just showed up, they'd have to include you." "It's not your fault," I said, reaching for mugs. "You've been caught in the middle of this for years. It wasn't fair to put you in that position." Jessica leaned against the counter watching me measure coffee grounds. "I've always envied you, you know." This unexpected statement made me pause. "Envied me? Why would you envy me? You were always the perfect daughter." "That's exactly why," she said with a sad smile. "Perfect is exhausting. Never questioning, never pushing back, always being exactly what they want. You had the courage to choose your own path. I just took the one of least resistance." The coffee maker gurgled between us as I absorbed her words. "I never thought of it that way. I sent that text because I wanted them to see you. Really see you," Jessica admitted. "I thought maybe in a public setting with all their friends around they wouldn't be able to maintain the fiction that our family is perfect without you in it." I poured the coffee into mugs, adding cream to Jessica's the way she'd always taken it. "That was a big risk." "Not big enough, apparently," she said, accepting the mug gratefully. "But Katie, a baby, I'm going to be an aunt." Her genuine excitement broke through the emotional heaviness, bringing the first real smile to my face since the previous evening. "November 12th is the due date," I told her. "We don't know the gender yet. We're deciding whether we want to find out or be surprised." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I want to be part of this, part of your child's life, whatever happens with Mum and Dad." "Of course you will be," I assured her, reaching for her hand. Aunt Jessica is going to be very important. We spent the morning talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't since childhood, about our different experiences growing up in the same house, about the pressure Jessica felt to be perfect and the pain I felt being perpetually inadequate, about her relationship with Thomas, which she confessed was showing strains under our parents' expectations, about my fears of motherhood when my own maternal role model was so complicated. I'm terrified of repeating the patterns, I admitted as we shared a late breakfast. What if I don't know how to love unconditionally because I never experienced it? Jessica's response surprised me with its wisdom. The fact that you're worried about it probably means you won't repeat it. Mum and Dad never questioned their approach. They still don't. But you're already reflecting on what kind of parent you want to be. As Jessica prepared to drive back to the suburbs, she hugged me tightly. This isn't over, you know. They're in shock now, but a grandchild. That changes the equation. Maybe, I acknowledged, not wanting to extinguish her hope, but unwilling to reignite my own. But I'm done chasing their approval. The ball is in their court now. The week that followed brought unexpected developments. My phone remained noticeably silent from my parents, but the wider family circle rallied in surprising ways. Aunt Patricia took me to lunch and shared stories of her own conflicts with my mother years before I was born. Cousin Marcus and his wife invited Sam and me to dinner once he returned from Portland. Even my grandmother called her quavering voice, conveying both congratulations and a cryptic message. Your grandfather and I are working on your parents. Some people take longer to see what matters. Meanwhile, my pregnancy announcement had created a minor sensation in Chicago's art community. The Meridian Gallery received an uptick in visitors, some openly curious about the rebel art director expecting a baby and rejecting family patriarchy, as one particularly dramatic blog had described me. My boss Charlotte was amused by the attention. I didn't realize hiring a pregnant gallery director would be such good publicity, she joked during our weekly meeting. But seriously, Katrina, if you need additional support or time off, just say the word. We want you healthy and stress-free. By the time Sam returned from Portland bearing a tiny Portland Trailblazers onesie and boundless enthusiasm, I had processed much of the initial shock and hurt. Together, we began planning for our expanding family, converting the small home office into a nursery, researching childcare options, debating names. What about your parents? Sam asked carefully one evening as we assembled a crib. Have you heard anything? Not directly, I admitted, sorting through tiny screws. Jessica says they're processing, whatever that means. Sam set down the instruction manual, his expression serious. And how are you feeling about that? I considered the question honestly. Sad, but unburdened somehow. Like I've finally stopped carrying this hope that they'll change, and it's letting me focus on the future instead of the past. He nodded understanding in his eyes. For what it's worth, I think you were incredibly brave at that party. Standing up for yourself for us for the baby, that took guts. Or hormones, I joked weakly. Nope, not letting you downplay it, he insisted, leaning over to kiss me. That was all Katharina Wilson courage, and it's one of the reasons I love you. 2 weeks after the anniversary disaster, as I was beginning to accept that my parents might simply write me out of their story entirely, an email arrived from my father. The subject line read simply, meeting. The message was brief and businesslike. Katharina, your mother and I would like to meet with you to discuss recent events. Please suggest a time and place convenient for you. Dad. No mention of the pregnancy, no acknowledgement of their behaviour at the anniversary. Just a terse request for a meeting as if we were scheduling a business appointment. I showed the email to Sam, who frowned at the impersonal tone. Are you going to respond? I think so, I said slowly, but on my terms. After consulting with my therapist, whom I'd been seeing regularly since the anniversary incident, I crafted a careful response. I'm willing to meet at Lakefront Cafe on Saturday at 1 p.m. Sam will be joining me. If that works for you, please confirm. My father's reply came within the hour, confirmed. The Lakefront Cafe was one of my favourite spots in Chicago, a bright, airy space with large windows overlooking the water. I'd chosen it carefully, public enough to discourage extreme behaviour, casual enough to set a different tone from the country club formality, and on my territory rather than theirs. Sam and I arrived 15 minutes early, securing a corner table with a good view of both the lake and the entrance. He squeezed my hand supportively as we waited, his solid presence beside me, a reminder of the family we were creating, regardless of what happened with my parents. Whatever they say, he reminded me quietly, we're good, you're good.
I still agree to this.
My parents arrived precisely at 1 o'clock, their punctuality as reliable as sunrise. They looked out of place in the casual cafe, my father in a pressed button-down shirt and slacks, my mother in a conservative blouse and pencil skirt, both wearing expressions better suited to a funeral than a family reconciliation. "Katerina," my father nodded as they approached our table. "Samuel." "It's Sam, actually," Sam corrected politely but firmly as he stood to greet them. "Only my grandmother calls me Samuel, and only when I'm in trouble." An awkward silence followed as they took the seats across from us. My mother's eyes darted around the cafe, taking in the eclectic artwork on the walls and the diverse clientele with barely disguised judgment. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," my father began formally. "We felt it was important to discuss what happened at our anniversary celebration." "I'm listening," I replied, fighting to keep my tone neutral. My father cleared his throat. "Your appearance at an event to which you weren't invited created an uncomfortable situation for everyone involved." I felt Sam tense beside me, but placed a calming hand on his knee. "Is that really how you want to start this conversation?" My father looked momentarily thrown by my direct response. In the past, I might have accepted his framing of the situation, might have apologized for causing discomfort, rather than addressing the underlying issue. "What your father means," my mother interjected with a tight smile, "is that we were surprised by your presence and things escalated in an unfortunate manner." "Things didn't escalate, Mom," I corrected. "You and Dad explicitly told me I wasn't family. Those were your words." A faint flush coloured my mother's cheeks. We were caught off guard. "For 40 years, I asked. Because this wasn't about one party. This was the culmination of decades of conditional acceptance." My father straightened in his chair, his businessman demeanour taking over. "We didn't come here to rehash old grievances. We came to discuss the development you announced." "My pregnancy," I said plainly. "You can say the word." "Yes, your pregnancy," he acknowledged stiffly. "This obviously changes certain considerations." Sam leaned forward slightly. "What considerations would those be exactly?" My mother's gaze flickered to Sam, then back to me. "Family considerations. A child should know their grandparents." "I agree," I said carefully, "but that relationship needs to be healthy, based on respect." "We've always respected you, Katerina," my father insisted. "We simply wanted what was best for you." "No," I countered. "You wanted what you thought was best for the family image. There's a difference." My mother glanced around nervously, concerned that our conversation might be overheard. "Can we please keep our voices down? This is hardly the place for such a personal discussion." "This is exactly the place," I replied. "Neutral ground. Somewhere I feel comfortable. If you'd prefer to meet at your country club next time, where you can have me removed if you don't like what I say, just let me know." The sharp response silenced them momentarily. I could see my father recalibrating his approach. "We understand that you're upset," he said eventually, "and perhaps there have been misunderstandings over the years, but a grandchild offers an opportunity to move forward to create a new relationship." "That sounds promising," Sam interjected. "What exactly does that new relationship look like to you?" My parents exchanged a quick glance, and I recognized the look. They had discussed this in advance, prepared a position as they would for a negotiation. "We're prepared to accept the pregnancy." My father began the phrasing, immediately setting off warning bells. "We would like to be involved in the child's life. We can provide financial assistance for the baby's needs, perhaps even help with a down payment on a larger apartment or house. In return," my mother continued smoothly, "we would expect certain accommodations." "Accommodations," I repeated the word, tasting bitter. "Such as attendance at family events dressed appropriately," she elaborated. "Discretion regarding certain aspects of your lifestyle choices. A united family presentation." Sam's eyebrows rose. "Are you actually proposing a transaction financial support in exchange for Katerina pretending to be someone she's not?" "We're simply suggesting a framework for moving forward," my father replied, his tone cooling. "All relationships involve compromise." "This isn't compromise," I said quietly. "This is control. You're offering to accept my pregnancy, something that requires absolutely nothing from you, in exchange for my continued compliance with your vision of who I should be." "That's not fair, Katerina," my mother protested. "We're trying to find a path forward." I studied their faces, my father's carefully neutral expression, my mother's thinly veiled anxiety. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as the towering figures of my childhood, but as they truly were people so invested in appearances that they had sacrificed authentic connection with their own daughter. "I want you in my child's life," I said finally, "but only if you can respect me as an equal adult, accept my choices without constant judgment, and love my child unconditionally, not as an extension of your family legacy or social standing, but as an individual." My father frowned. "That sounds rather one-sided." "It's actually the bare minimum for a healthy relationship," Sam pointed out. "Respect, acceptance, unconditional love. Most families manage it without formal negotiations." "Our family has certain standards," my mother began, but I interrupted her. "No, Mom, your family, the one you and Dad created, had certain standards. The family I'm creating with Sam will have different ones. The question is whether you want to be part of both." My father's expression hardened. "I don't think you understand the concessions we're already making. Your lifestyle choices reflect on the entire family name. My lifestyle choices include a successful career in a field I'm passionate about, a loving relationship with a wonderful man, and now a child." I replied, my voice steady. "If that reflects poorly on the family name, then perhaps the problem isn't with my choices." A tense silence fell over the table. My mother's hand moved to her pearl necklace, a nervous habit I'd observed throughout my childhood, whenever situations fell outside her carefully controlled parameters. "I think," Sam said gently, breaking the silence, "that we all need time to process this conversation. Stress isn't good for Katerina or the baby right now." My father nodded stiffly. "Perhaps that would be best." As they prepared to leave, my mother hesitated. "The baby, when is it due exactly?" "November 12th, I answered. "And we don't know yet if it's a boy or girl. We're having the anatomy scan next month." Something flickered across her face, a softness I rarely saw. "I see. Well, please, keep us informed." It wasn't much, but it was the first genuine interest she'd shown in the pregnancy itself, rather than what it meant for family appearances. A tiny crack in the perfect facade. "I will," I promised. As we watched them leave, Sam wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" "Not really," I admitted, "but I think I will be." That evening, Jessica called. "I heard about the meeting," she said without preamble. "Dad mentioned it when I stopped by to pick up some old photo albums." "How did he describe it?" I asked, curious about their perspective. "He said it was inconclusive. Classic Dad understatement. But Mum was different afterward. Quieter. She asked me questions about your gallery, your apartment. Things she's never shown interest in before." "Really?" This surprised me. "Really," Jessica confirmed. And she let slip something interesting. "Did you know she used to paint before she met Dad?" "Mum, no way." Apparently Grandma Elise has some of her watercolours stored in the attic. Mum said they weren't very good, but she used to enjoy it. This revelation stunned me. In all our battles over my artistic pursuits, my mother had never once mentioned her own experience with art. Why wouldn't she tell me that all those years I was fighting for my right to study art? "I don't know," Jessica sighed, "but I get the feeling there's a lot about Mum we don't know. She's so locked into being Eleanor Wilson, perfect wife and mother, that maybe she forgot who she was before that." The conversation left me with much to contemplate. The next day, a peculiar package arrived at my apartment. The anniversary gift I'd left with my parents, returned unopened, but accompanied by a handwritten note in my mother's elegant script. "Katharina, I've been reflecting on our meeting. There are things I should have told you years ago that might have made a difference. I once loved art too, watercolour specifically, not at your level of talent or commitment, just a hobby that brought me joy. I set it aside when I married your father, believing that was what a proper wife and mother should do. Perhaps I've been harder on your choices because they remind me of roads not taken. I would like to meet again, just the two of us, if you're willing. Mum." The note wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was an opening, a small crack in the perfect facade my mother had maintained for decades, and for now that was enough to kindle a careful hope. 3 months passed, bringing subtle shifts in both my body and my family relationships. By my second trimester, my pregnancy became visibly apparent, my gallery wardrobe adapting to accommodate my growing bump. The morning sickness that had plagued my first trimester subsided, replaced by a surge of energy that I channeled into both work and preparing for the baby. The Meridian Gallery thrived under my direction, our summer exhibition, featuring emerging artists from underrepresented backgrounds, garnering attention from critics and collectors alike. My professional confidence grew alongside my belly, the peculiar intersection of impending motherhood and career advancement feeling less contradictory than I'd feared. My relationship with my parents evolved in halting imperfect steps. My mother and I met for lunch, twice awkward affairs, where we carefully avoided the most painful topics while attempting to build something new. During our second meeting, she hesitantly asked if she could see the ultrasound photos I'd mentioned having on my phone. Is that the baby? She asked, her voice softer than I was accustomed to hearing as she peered at the black and white image. Yes, I confirmed, pointing carefully. That's the head, and there's a hand, and see the tiny fingers. It's remarkable, she murmured, studying the image with unexpected intensity. Do you know if it's a boy or girl? A girl, I told her, the words still filling me with wonder. We just found out last week. 'Cause since. Something shifted in my mother's expression, a complicated emotion I couldn't quite name. A girl, she repeated. Your father always wanted a grandson to carry on the Wilson name, but girls. She paused, collecting herself. Girls can be quite special. These tentative connections with my mother existed in strange parallel to my father's continued distance. He communicated primarily through Jessica, sending formal inquiries about the pregnancy, but making no direct contact after our cafe meeting. He's struggling, Jessica explained during one of our regular sister dinners. His entire worldview is built around control and certainty. You've challenged both. I'm not trying to challenge him, I protested. I'm just living my life. Sometimes that's the biggest challenge of all, she replied with unexpected wisdom. The most surprising development came on a sunny Saturday in August, when I was approximately 6 months pregnant. The gallery was hosting a special exhibition featuring local artists' interpretations of Chicago's changing urban landscape. I was in my element discussing a particularly striking mixed media piece with potential buyers when I sensed a shift in the room's energy. Turning, I spotted my mother standing uncertainly near the entrance, looking simultaneously out of place in her conservative attire and strangely vulnerable in her obvious discomfort. Excuse me, I murmured to the collectors before crossing the gallery to greet her. Mum, this is a surprise. Jessica mentioned your exhibition, she explained, glancing around at the contemporary artwork with thinly veiled bewilderment. I thought I should see where you work, what you do. The gesture, small as it might seem to an outsider, represented a monumental shift. In the decade since I'd chosen this career path, my mother had never once visited any gallery where I worked. I'd be happy to show you around, I offered cautiously. For the next hour, I guided her through the exhibition, explaining concepts and techniques in simple terms, introducing her to colleagues, showing her my office with its view of the city skyline. She asked surprisingly thoughtful questions, though I caught her occasional wince at some of the more avant-garde pieces. This is the artist I've been most excited to represent, I said as we paused before a series of paintings by a young woman whose work combined traditional Chinese brush techniques with contemporary American street art influences. Maylin just graduated from SAIC last year, but she's already generating significant interest. My mother studied the pieces with genuine attention. There's something powerful about them, she admitted. I don't understand all of it, but I can feel the emotion. That's exactly what art should do, I said, unable to keep the passion from my voice. Make you feel something, even if you don't immediately understand it intellectually. She turned to look at me, then really look at me, perhaps for the first time, seeing not the rebellious daughter who had defied her plans, but a woman confident in her chosen path. You belong here, she said quietly. I can see that now. Before I could respond to this unexpected acknowledgement, a sharp pain lanced through my abdomen, causing me to gasp and grab the nearby wall for support. Katharina, alarm flooded my mother's face. What's wrong? Just a cramp. I managed, though the intensity had frightened me. The doctor said they're normal as the uterus expands. But my mother's expression shifted to one I'd rarely seen directed at me, protective concern. You're pale. Let's find somewhere for you to sit down. She guided me to my office with surprising authority, sending my assistant for water and insisting I put my feet up while she called Sam. I'm fine, I protested weakly. There's no need to worry Sam when he's at that important client meeting. Nonsense, she replied in a tone that brooked no argument. Some things take priority. The cramps subsided after I rested, but my mother insisted on driving me to the hospital for a checkup, overriding my objections with unexpected firmness. Sam met us there, his worried face relaxing somewhat when the doctor confirmed everything appeared normal. "Just your body's way of telling you to slow down a bit," the doctor advised. "More rest, less stress, plenty of water." As we prepared to leave, Sam needed to move the car from emergency parking, leaving my mother and me alone momentarily in the hospital hallway. "Thank you," I said sincerely, "for bringing me here, for calling Sam." She adjusted her purse strap, seemingly uncomfortable with the gratitude. "I may have made many mistakes, Katerina, but I do know something about pregnancy. I had 2 of my own after all." Gang. The simple statement opened a door I hadn't realized existed. "You never talk about your pregnancies, about when Jessica and I were born." Something vulnerable flickered across her face. It was different then. Women were expected to handle these things privately, but I remember how frightening it could be, the uncertainty. "I'm scared sometimes," I admitted. "About labor, about whether I'll know what to do afterward." "Every mother feels that way," she said, and for once there was no judgment in her voice, just shared experience. "But you'll figure it out. You always were determined that way." It wasn't a profound reconciliation, not yet. But as Sam helped me into the car, with my mother following in her own vehicle to ensure we got home safely, I felt something shift between us. The faintest beginning of a bridge across the chasm that had separated us for so long. The next development came in the form of an unexpected package delivered to our apartment the following week. A beautiful cherry wood rocking chair with a simple note. "Every nursery needs one, Dad." No personal message, no direct communication, but an acknowledgement nonetheless. When I called Jessica in surprise, she laughed. "He spent 3 days researching the safest, most ergonomic rocking chairs before ordering. Had it delivered to their house first, so he could inspect it personally before sending it to you." "Really?" I found this hard to imagine. My father, the corporate attorney, researching baby furniture. "Really," she confirmed. "And he's been reading a book about modern grandparenting. I spotted it in his study last weekend. The image was so incongruous with the rigid, unyielding man who had told me I wasn't family that I didn't quite know how to process it. But when Sam assembled the rocking chair in our newly painted nursery, I found myself sitting in it each evening, one hand on my growing belly, wondering if perhaps family relationships could heal in ways I hadn't dared to imagine. In early October, with just over a month until my due date, the final piece of our complex family puzzle clicked unexpectedly into place. Sam and I had scheduled a private tour at the Meridian for our closest friends, a combination baby shower and celebration of my professional achievements. I was arranging flowers in the main gallery space when my assistant approached nervously. "Katharina, your father is here. Should I show him in?" My father stood awkwardly in the reception area, more casually dressed than I could remember seeing him in years. Khakis and a simple button-down rather than his usual suit. He held a large gift bag and looked uncharacteristically uncertain. "Dad," I greeted him unconsciously, resting one hand on my now prominent belly. "This is unexpected." "Jessica mentioned your event today," he explained. "I won't stay long. I just wanted to drop this off." He extended the gift bag. "It's nothing elaborate, just something I thought might be meaningful." Curious, I peered into the bag and carefully withdrew a small wooden picture frame. Inside was a black and white photograph I'd never seen before. My mother, much younger, holding an infant wrapped in a blanket, looking down with an expression of such transparent love, it took my breath away. "That's you," my father said quietly. "One day after you were born, your mother had been in labor for 22 hours. The doctors wanted to do a C-section, but she refused. Said you were doing things your own way from the start, and she wasn't going to interfere." I stared at the image, at the unguarded tenderness on my mother's face. "I've never seen this." "There was a time," he continued, his voice taking on a quality I'd rarely heard, "when your mother and I were different people, before expectations and appearances became so central." He gestured vaguely at the gallery around us. "I won't pretend to understand this world you've chosen. It's foreign to me, but seeing you here, successful on your own terms, preparing to become a mother yourself." He paused, visibly struggling. Perhaps understanding isn't necessary for pride. The word hung between us. Pride. Something I'd sought from him for so long had eventually convinced myself I no longer needed. "Would you like to stay?" I asked, surprising myself with the invitation. "Meet some of my friends, see more of the gallery." He hesitated, clearly tempted but uncomfortable. "Another time, perhaps." "This is your day." "But I would like..." "That is your mother, and I would very much like to be at the hospital when the baby comes." It wasn't everything. The decades of hurt couldn't be erased by one conversation, one acknowledgement, but it was a beginning, a genuine attempt to step into my world rather than demanding I conform to his. I'd like that, I told him honestly. We'll call you when it's time. Aurora Elise Wilson was born on November 9th, 3 days before her due date, after 16 hours of labour that tested every ounce of my strength and resolve. Sam never left my side, his steady presence anchoring me through the waves of pain and exhaustion. When the nurses finally placed our daughter on my chest, tiny, red-faced and indignant at her abrupt introduction to the world, the rush of love was so overwhelming it brought tears to my eyes. "She's perfect," Sam whispered, one gentle finger stroking our daughter's cheek. "Just like her mother." Later, after we'd been moved to a recovery room and Aurora had been measured, weighed and swaddled, Sam slipped out to the waiting room where my parents had been for hours. They entered tentatively, my mother's eyes immediately finding the bundle in my arms, my father hanging back slightly as if unsure of his welcome. "Would you like to hold your granddaughter?" I offered, extending the swaddled infant toward my mother. Her hands trembled slightly as she took Aurora, cradling her with practiced ease that belied the decades since she'd held a newborn. "She's beautiful, Katrina," she whispered. "She has your father's chin. And your eyes, I think," I added, noticing how my mother's gaze remained fixed on the baby's face, drinking in every detail. My father approached cautiously, peering over my mother's shoulder. "She's so small," he murmured, seeming both awed and terrified by her fragility. "Would you like to hold her too, Dad?" I asked. He looked momentarily panicked. "I haven't held a baby since Jessica was born. I wouldn't know how." "It's like riding a bicycle," my mother assured him, carefully transferring Aurora to his reluctant arms. "Support her head. They're just like that." My father stood frozen, holding his granddaughter with reverent care, his expression transforming into something I'd never seen before. A profound vulnerability that stripped away the corporate attorney, the family patriarch, leaving just a man meeting his granddaughter for the first time. "Hello, little one," he whispered, his voice catching. "Welcome to the world." In that moment, watching my parents with my daughter, I realized that family isn't static. It evolves, breaks, heals, transforms. The journey from that devastating rejection at their anniversary celebration to this hospital room had been neither straight nor simple. There would be challenges ahead, old patterns threatening to reassert themselves, boundaries to maintain. But as Aurora's tiny hand wrapped around my father's finger as my mother wiped away an uncharacteristic tear, I understood that sometimes the families we create can help heal the families we come from. Not through forgetting the past or pretending the hurt never happened, but through writing new chapters with clearer vision and stronger boundaries. 1 year later, we gathered in our backyard for Aurora's first birthday, a small celebration with Sam's parents, Jessica and Thomas, a few close friends, and my parents. My mother had brought a homemade pie, her first attempt at baking in years. My father sat on a blanket on the grass, his expensive trousers forgotten, as he helped Aurora stack colourful blocks. Watching them, I reflected on how much had changed in the 18 months since that fateful anniversary banquet. The relationship with my parents wasn't perfect. We still had moments of tension, still navigated certain topics carefully. But it was real in a way it had never been before, built on acceptance rather than expectation. As Aurora tottered unsteadily between her grandparents, I caught Sam's eye across the yard, his smile reflecting my own sense of cautious wonder at how life had unfolded. "Thank you all for coming today to celebrate Aurora's first year," I said as we gathered around the cake. "This past year has taught me so much about family, that it's both what we're born into and what we choose to create, that it can break and heal and transform, that love, when it's real, has room for differences and boundaries and growth." I looked at my daughter, her face smeared with frosting, and then at the circle of people who would shape her life in different ways. Aurora will grow up knowing she's loved unconditionally, that her voice matters, that family isn't about perfection or appearances, but about showing up for each other even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. My father cleared his throat, uncharacteristically emotional. "I'd like to say something if I may." "Kasi." He looked directly at me, the corporate mask completely absent. "I was wrong, Katrina. At the anniversary dinner and for many years before that, family isn't about who fits a certain mold. It's about love that remains even when we don't understand each other's choices." My mother reached for his hand, her own eyes glistening. "We're still learning," she added softly. "But we're grateful for the chance to be part of Aurora's life. and yours. As the party continued around us, I realized that the painful rejection I'd experienced had ultimately led to something precious. Not just a reconciliation, but a more authentic relationship built on truth rather than pretense. My daughter would know all parts of her family history, the painful and the beautiful, and would learn from a young age what had taken me decades to understand, that real family accepts you as you are, not as they wish you to be. Have you ever experienced rejection from family that eventually led to healing? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others feel less alone in their struggles. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with anyone who might need to hear that family relationships can heal even after painful rejections. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve to be accepted exactly as you are, no compromises.